Hey everybody! So today we're going to talk some more about planets conjunct the midheaven. So a conjunction, and this says 10th house, the midheaven is on here. Well, eventually we will do a midheaven card and an IC card, descendant card, and ascendant card. But it is mentioned on the 10th house card. So just briefly, because in the video before I did go into this a little bit. What is the midheaven? The midheaven is like the high noon of the chart. The ascendant is where the chart rises. The descendant is where the chart sets. So the midheaven is like the high noon of the chart. I think of it as the highest and most idealized version of oneself. Kind of the public face, the face that the public at large gets to see. Or probably gets to see. Also who the person wants to be when they grow up, or wanted to be when they grow, or something along those lines. That's kind of how I think of the midheaven. Now, if you're using Placidus or Porphyry or something like that, the midheaven will be the cusp of the 10th house. I use Placidus by default. That's my preference. Natalie's preference is Porphyry. So that's why the midheaven got put on the 10th house card. Because if you're using one of those or something like that or whatever, the 10th house cusp will be the midheaven. Now, if you're using whole signs, the midheaven can float. It'll float. It can be in the 9th house. It can be in the 11th house. It can be in the 8th house. It can move around. So while the midheaven can certainly be a career thing, for the purpose of this, I'm not really going to go so much into that, because really, to me, the midheaven is the highest and most idealized version of yourself, and that tends to kind of be the case regardless of what house system you use, right? If you're using whole signs, say, your midheaven might not fall in the 10th house, so it might not have as much to do with career. If you think about the midheaven in the ways that I'm saying to think about it, you won't really go wrong if, regardless of what system you use. But that's not to say that the midheaven can't have anything to do with, doesn't have anything to do with career. It does, but it's not always the way that I go with it, especially depending on what chart system a client might want me to use, because I've got clients who want me to use all kinds of stuff. And whole signs is requested, so I have no problem doing that. But anyway, so we'll be talking about Jupiter through Pluto today. Jupiter through Pluto and Chiron conjunct the midheaven, what this might mean for the person. Not universal. Do not take this as gospel or as absolute truth. These are just some ideas that you can fuck with on your own and see if they fit for the chart you're looking at, yours, somebody else's, whatever. So okay, let's say you've got Jupiter conjunct the midheaven. To me, Jupiter is a planet. It's what needs to be expressed. So Jupiter is the what here. Beliefs and truth, I would think, would be very important for the person. That's what's needing to be expressed through the vehicle of the highest and most idealized version of themselves. Wisdom. I think wisdom is something else that needs to be expressed. Generosity. I think generosity is another thing that might pop up. They might be pretty optimistic. And expansion. Jupiter is expansion too. They might be, what needs to be expressed is expanding upon the highest and most idealized version of their self, say, in however a way, by way of whatever sign the midheaven is in. So all of those kinds of things. Also, there is a larger than life quality to Jupiter here. Jupiter in general, but Jupiter conjunct the MC, there is a feeling of a larger than life quality to it. It does kind of, along with the sun, it does kind of knee jerk make me think that the person probably does want to be known for something. I don't know if I would always stay with that at all, but I could see my mind going that way. What everything else is going on in the chart would depend on if it would stay there. But that is one way that you could go with it, or play around with it anyway. Okay, so we'll do Saturn next. Saturn conjunct the midheaven. Now, Saturn conjunct Saturn conjunct the midheaven. It makes me think. Okay, so the person, because Saturn can be limitations, it can be boundaries, it can be restrictions. Depending on what else is going on in the chart, this might be what is needing to be expressed. I do think Saturn wants you to break through this shit. I've mentioned this several times. I do think Saturn wants you to break through this, should the native feel this way. But there could be some feelings, especially when the native is younger. I think Saturn ages well. Saturn does age well. So it tends to anyway. That's not universal either, but it does tend to age well. So I would think they might feel less restricted, less limited as they get older. That's kind of where my mind would go. Should they feel restricted or limited at all? That might not be how Saturn plays out, but it could. I would also think that regardless if they've ever felt limited or restricted or whatever with becoming the highest and most idealized version of themselves, what is really needing to be expressed is authority and mastery. These kinds of things are what is needing to be expressed through the highest and most idealized version of the person. So some kind of position of authority kind of makes sense here. In the public, that would make sense here. That doesn't have to go that way, but it would make sense just taking this particular aspect in a chart into account. I didn't say this with Jupiter, but you'd want to look at the house cusp that Sagittarius falls on in the chart. That house will bend to Jupiter. You can also look at if you use traditional rulership. I like to use both modern and traditional. You could also look at the house cusp that Pisces is on in the chart. That house will also bend to Jupiter, conjunct the MC with Saturn. You'd want to look at the house cusp that Capricorn falls on in the chart. That house will then bend to Saturn conjunct the MC. Again, if you like using traditional rulership, you can also look at the house cusp that Aquarius falls on in the chart. That would also bend to Saturn conjunct the MC. That house would. Okay, so now we'll go to Uranus. Okay, so what's needing to be expressed with Uranus? We're talking about like rebellion and revolution and weirdness and sudden change. Let me see. Liberation. That's one of my favorites actually for Uranus. What's needing to be expressed? Liberation. Chaos is another one. Uranus can be rather chaotic with the sudden changing stuff. It can be. It doesn't have to go that way. So all of those notions, all of those ideas, or any or all of those, you know, it's going to be a little different for everybody, but those are needing to be expressed through the vehicle of the highest and most idealized version of the person. There might be a changeable quality to them, kind of like that. It's not a moody changeable like the moon conjunct the MC, or it's different. It's sudden. It's quick. It's fast. There might be that quality might exist. But the person ultimately well, if you've got it in the 10th house, I would think if you've got the MC in the 10th house, or you're using Placidus or Porphyry, I would think that one's career should probably be liberating. The highest and most idealized version of oneself, though, should liberate the person, absolutely. Allow them to embrace weirdness and difference, any differences they have, any quirks, all of those kinds of things. And how this happens would depend on, you know, the sign that the MC is in, and, you know, Uranus. Though I guess Uranus could also be in a different sign. Anyway, you gotta take everything into account, but Anyway, you'd want to look at the you'd want to look at the house cusp that Aquarius is on in the chart. That house will then bend to Uranus conjunct the MC, and it'll help you flesh everything out even further. Okay, the next one, Neptune. Neptune conjunct the MC. Neptune can be, you know, spiritual. It can be creative. It can be imaginative. It can be really fucking unclear and lacking boundaries, and kind of a chameleon, like a shapeshifter. These kinds of things will need to be expressed through the vehicle of the midheaven, of the highest and most idealized version of yourself. So perhaps what's needing to be expressed is spirituality, or perhaps what's needing to be expressed is creativity. Another thing that might need to be expressed would be something like a lack of clarity, though if it's going on that way, something probably does need to be tweaked. And there'll probably be other indicators for that in the chart too that would kind of back that up. You would want to look at the house cusp that that Pisces is on in the chart. That house will then bend to Neptune conjunct the MC. Yeah. Okay, so then you've got Pluto conjunct the MC. And Pluto is, you know, Pluto's power, it's control. These are it's transformation also. So all of these concepts need to be, or some of them anyway. Other things are like, there could be like destruction is a Pluto thing, but rebuilding is too. So that kind of goes along the lines of transforming. It just transformation, it just kind of depends on what's being, you know, and how it's being transformed, right? As to if that's an easy or challenging thing. I would think that the person probably, you know, they're the highest and most idealized version of themselves. I would think what's needing to be expressed is power, for sure. There is like a power quality. For sure, that's kind of where my mind would go first. Control as well. Control is another one. There are other keywords that you could use too, but those are the two where my mind would go first. Doesn't mean that my mind would necessarily stay there, but that is where it would go first. You'd want to look at the house cusp that Scorpio is on in the chart. That house will bend to Pluto conjunct the midheaven. Okay, so we'll also talk about Chiron. Chiron is like your core wounding. So if you've got Chiron conjunct the MC, my thought is there probably is some wounding going on. My first thought would be there is some wounding going on with the person's highest and most idealized version of themselves. How they, you know, like, and, you know, depending on what sign this is going on, and we'll tell you how, but something wounding about perhaps them feeling like they can become this version of themselves at all. There could be wounding, you know, the midheaven can also be like, because it is a public, it can indicate more public, you know, like public things. It could also deal with your reputation. Your reputation you could perceive it as being somewhat wounded. Whether or not this is actually the case, I don't know. You'd have to take everything into account. But there could be some perceived wounding along those lines. Those are just, that's not a comfortable place for Chiron to be, for sure. And it would definitely, if somebody had this in their chart, it would definitely catch my attention. Like, why is that there, and what do they want to learn from this? Anyway, I'm gonna get going. If you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Let's Fuck with Astrology. I'm at Saturn Season Astrology on Instagram. Natalie is at Abaturno Astrology on Instagram. If you want to like or subscribe or whatever the fuck people do with videos on YouTube, you can find us by searching for Let's Fuck with Astrology in the YouTube search bar. If you do the Reddit thing, come join us on the subreddit Let's Fuck with Astrology. And if you're interested in the star cards, go to letsfuckwithastrology.com/star-cards. Okay, y'all. I'll see y'all later.